Now, I taught at University College London. I taught philosophy from 1974 to 2011 when I retired. And for longer than that, going way back into my teens, I thought quite a lot about personal identity. And came up with some very radical ideas about it. So I'd like to share with you some of the fruit of that thought. To focus us on what I'll be saying, I want to turn this into a little bit of a story. Now, I think you've all heard of the Sphinx in Greek mythology. The Sphinx would stop wayfarers and present them with a riddle. If the answer wasn't right, as it almost always was not, the Sphinx would devour the wayfarers.
Eat them.
Eat them, yeah. Well, devour is a nice one. And especially, you'll see why I choose that word. Because if the riddle was rightly answered, which would only happen once, the Sphinx would, I think in the common story, would leap to its death. But there was a version in which it would devour itself.
The virgins?
Yeah, the Sphinx would devour itself if the riddle was rightly answered.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
If the answer was right, he was gone.
He was going to devour himself.
Lose,
Yeah.
yeah.
I like to have seen that.
If not, he just eat them.
Yes,
And
that was the deal. Okay. And then later in medieval legend, there were dragons. And something was added to this that if you were able to slay the dragon, sometimes you would get a wonderful treasure for your effort that was being guarded by the dragon. Then I want to combine these a bit and talk about a dragon. I've called the dragon of the fear of death as annihilation. This is going to be my target. It's through answering a certain riddle. It's a bit like a riddle. You can destroy this thing. That's what I'll be trying to do during the talk. And furthermore, you'd find yourself loaded down with some treasure. Now, let me explain what the treasure is. I've written treasure of boundless experience. I've represented it by a cornucopia and a picture that some of you back there won't see very well, I'm afraid, but it's a picture of a strange world. It looks like probably a moon of this big planet that's got a ring around it. And if you look really close, I don't think any of you will be able to see this, there's something like a lake here, and standing at the side of it is some creature. It looks a bit meditative looking at the lake. Now, this represents some of the variety of life that might be expected in the universe at large. Some of the variety of consciousness existing in the universe. And this treasure of boundless experience involves you discovering that all that experience, wherever it is actually yours. You will be standing by such a lake with such a planet in the sky. And that's not the end of the treasure. There's another thing coming along with it that is a little bit like what you might get in the medieval legend. It's this. In answering the riddle, destroying this fierce creature, you'll find yourself in possession of boundless experience and also what I've called understanding of nature's great secret. I've represented it by novel and periodic table. Periodic table gives us the elements of our physical world. You will arrive at an understanding of why these elements are the basis of our physical world. An understanding, I think, goes beyond that of perhaps any of these cutting-edge physicists.
The owl is the symbol of banana.
So the owl is a symbol of wisdom, knowledge, understanding. So let me first say a bit more about this dragon of the fear of death as annihilation. To get across to you what I mean by this fear of death as annihilation, I'd like to read to you some excerpts from a great, powerful poem by Larkin, Philip Larkin. The poem is called Obad. From it, I've excerpted these lines to get across what I mean by this dread of death. Okay. So here's Larkin's poem. I work all day and get half drunk at night. Waking at 4 to soundless dark, I stare. In time, the curtain edges will grow light. Till then, I see what's really always there. Unresting death, a whole day nearer now. The total emptiness forever. The sure extinction that we travel to and shall be lost in always. Not to be here, not to be anywhere. Nothing more terrible, nothing more true. This is a special way of being afraid, no trick dispels. Specious stuff that says no rational being can fear a thing it will not feel. Not seeing that this is what we fear. No sight, no sound, no touch, or taste or smell. Nothing to think with, nothing to love or link with. The anesthetic from which none come round. Okay? Now I'm hoping that my answer to the riddle will cause this fear to disappear and perhaps consume itself. Now the riddle that we need to answer is it first looks very simple. It's very basic. There are people in this room. We could, in theory, make a list of them, and we could attach to each thing on the list lots of facts. Biography, psychology, sociology. Now, the question I want to ask is, how do I discover which of these people in the room I am? This additional thing of it being me, whatever else may be true of it. How do I discover that? And I suggest I don't discover it by going through some list of facts. Not at all. I discover it in a very obvious and simple way. I discover it because of the first person character of the experience. I am that person in the room that has the lines of vision all leading in here, whose sensations are what I'll call immediate. Example could be pain. A pain that's mine is one that presents itself all too plainly in my experience. It hurts. A pain I regard as someone else's is outside. I might care quite a lot about it, but not in the same way. So I care about my own pain in a self-interested way, whereas I might have sympathy with the pain of another. So I couldn't have sympathy with my own pain. It doesn't make sense. And I couldn't have that direct self-interest concerning pain of another either. So self-interest is attached to this quality of immediacy in the experience that identifies whatever is having it as me. Now, I'm going to be arguing that we make a mistake in thinking about this. And one way I might be able to clarify this for us is by use of this dog. This dog, it's a gift from a very dear friend to my family. It's a doorstop, although we don't use it much for that. And it's a lovely dog. Now, here's our usual view of what's going on. The dog, in our usual view, is being me, and its tail is the experience it's having being mine. Okay, so you've heard this talk about how sometimes it's felt that the tail is wagging the dog, that there's a misidentification of what's really important, what's really controlling. And here's our ordinary view of what's going on. The experience that, so there's something that I am in this view. And what makes that be me is a matter of great debate in philosophy. Is it something psychological? Is it the identity of the body? Puzzle cases are brought up to argue about this, where you get rid of the memory but you keep the body, or you make the memory go on into another body, and you ask, where would I be? So there's this thing about which I said there could be so many facts given, is supposed to be what I am. Okay, that settles who I am. But of course, if you just saw a list of the people in this room, I would just be one among the others. That wouldn't tell you that it was me. Right? What tells you that it's me is this first person character, the immediacy of the experience. And what I'm going to argue for is that what's been happening in our ordinary way of thinking about this is that the tail has been wagging the dog. So we want to switch these around so that we see that what's important in something being me is the experience having this character I've been describing of being mine, the immediacy of the experience. That anything that had experience that was mine would therein have to be me. That's how I discover who I am, and it would have to be true wherever that's where I was. So being me is just the tail that's wagged by that dog, instead of the other way around. That's what I'm going to argue. All right? Now, this first person character of experience, the immediacy, is present in all experience equally. I don't think you could call something experience if it didn't have that character. What would it be? So what I'm going to be claiming is, as I said at the beginning, that all experience is mine. That I'm mistaken in thinking that what I am is confined, to one particular organism in a room. It will seem like that to each, that it's the only one that has this distinction of being me, because each will have this kind of first-person experience. But there'll be an illusion that, as I say, that it's the only one. In fact, being me will be all over the place. These will be different versions of being me. And as I remarked before, the self-interest goes along with it. Every pain had by any conscious thing will be my pain for the only reason I identify something as my pain, which is that it's actually there and it hurts. All pains are like that. They're not some strange other thing that doesn't hurt. Oh yes, I had handouts for you. What a shame. Shaheen was supposed to give them to. Yes, on these hands, maybe they'll arrive before I'm finished, and then I can give them to you. Let me tell you what they are, because I think they would have been helpful. You'd see the title of the talk I've given it, Finding Myself. And then there are what you might call signposts to parts of my talk that would help you to follow it. So what I'll do is I'll just read out the signposts that we've already passed and what's coming up. So the first was fear of annihilation and death. The second was, how do I discover which I am? Which of those in the room I am? Then it's simply the immediacy of my experience, and the experience being mine, immediacy is the dog, and being me is merely its tail. The next signpost is stripping away what doesn't matter. So I'm going to begin arguing for the truth of this view about what's controlling in this by taking away from what you can recognize to be you those things that turn out not to matter. And I'll do this through considerations and thought experiments, where I'll ask you to imagine hypothetical situations and decide whether you would no longer exist in them or whether you'd still be there. The first I want to bring to bear in this is Nietzsche's idea of eternal recurrence. Philosopher Nietzsche, 19th century philosopher Nietzsche, believed that the following was true. He thought that the universe was finite, that it had in it only finite things, that those things could only be positioned in finite different ways, and that whenever the whole of the world was organized in one particular pattern, it would inevitably lead on in a certain order because of what you might call determinism. That, the way it was at one moment would force it into a particular next state, which would then move on in a way that was absolutely determined by what was there to begin with. So if you put these together, I don't believe all these things. I want you to understand that. So I'm not arguing for this at all. I just want us to, well, treat it as a kind of story. But put this all together, finite universe, finite number of things, finite ways in which they could be arranged, and any particular arrangement of the world leading on always in the same pattern. And what you get is that eventually there will be a repetition of it all. Now he doesn't mean in 2 or 3 years, because he's talking about the whole world and all the, extraordinarily complicated things in it. So what he's thinking is eons and eons will go by and the world will develop, and then there will be chaos finally brought about. He thought that would be the case. And then it will be reorganized and it will go on for eons and eons and eons. There won't be a repetition after that first chaos, because there are too many ways things could be. So you'd have to go forward into a future much further than anyone could imagine for there finally to be that point where, because of the finite ways things could work, everything struck a repetition. So the moment the world is in now, with us in this room thinking about these things, that will come around again after the eons and eons and eons. And then, of course, it will lead on in exactly the same way. So it will come once again after incredible eons have passed. And it'll come again and again. It'll come again infinite times, he thought. He thought that this whole business existed through infinite time. That it had done this through infinite pasts, and it would do this through an infinite future. So that was his idea of the universe. Again, not one with which I agree. But you can raise a very interesting question if you think about what this would be, what it would be like, concerning what you are. And that's what I want to look at. So, if you think that there'll be an occurrence of a thing just like you, eons hence, and then another occurrence after that, and so on and so on. One way you could think about it is that these would be mere duplicates of you. So, yes, there will be a being that's just like me in that future, and it will experience a life, just as I have done, but that'll be its own experience, won't be mine. It's, again, like the way you would think of a duplicate of you, right? So its fate is sealed off from yours. So there won't be any, so this would be a kind of afterlife, wouldn't it? But you wouldn't be having an afterlife on this first interpretation. But that wasn't Nietzsche's interpretation. Nietzsche thought that each time it would be me. And there's a rather convincing way of thinking about it in favor of what he thought. Look, this time in your life, way back when the sperm met the egg and you were conceived and then you were born and all that, you were there. That was your experience. No one else's, it was yours. But then, if all of that's going to happen exactly the same way again, the sperm cell meeting the egg, why wouldn't you be there? You were there the first time. That was enough for you to be there. What would shut you off from being there again when exactly the same pattern of thing is happening? So it would be you. As I say, I think this is rather convincing. I mean, I'm going to try to convince you, still further, that you would be these things that might have been dismissed as duplicates. But this is a good beginning, I think, a softening up for us to think of ourselves as existing further than we might have believed we did. Okay. There's a further thing you might think about here with this case in mind. The experience of each of these successive versions of me is exactly the same, exactly similar in character, right? Because there's this precise repetition. So there's once again the experience of being in this room and talking in exactly the same way with all the same things happening. Now, in none of the recurrences of this is this be experienced as a recurrence or as a repetition. Right? It's recreated each time as new. So it has exactly the same character. Now here's a thought. Then, yes, okay, maybe you will go along with Nietzsche and think that the experience would be mine and that would be me. But maybe there wouldn't be additional experience. Maybe the experience of being here in the room, listening just as you're doing in exactly this way, that how many times that may occur, it's still that same experience. And therefore, there's no additional experience, even if this recurs infinite times. Now, let me try to make that idea clearer for you by talking about what I label on these among these signposts as simultaneous similar occurrences. Where is this experience across an infinite universe? Now let's leave Nietzsche's idea of a recurring universe and talk about the universe more as some of the physicists who theorize about it would think it to be. Now, there are many of those physicists who think about the universe who think that it's infinite in extent. Not all, but many. And again, let's just treat this as a story now. Let's just try to ask ourselves what would be the case if this universe was infinite in extent. You know, with the same kinds of things going on, but no end to it. Well, I'm not the only one to have noticed this. You would think that there would be repetitions across such a universe of every situation. Now, maybe the world is very complicated on a very small level, so that you wouldn't easily get repetitions. But all I'm going to be interested in is an experience just like this one, being in this room listening to this talk, being precisely repeated in terms of everything that's discriminable in the experience. Okay, and that would be easy to get. If you had an infinite universe, in fact, you ought to expect that there are infinite such repetitions. Not within what we call the observable universe. It's much too small to expect that to occur. But again, like as in Nietzsche with the eons and eons, here we're moving out, and we're going much further. In fact, there was a YouTube video I saw where someone actually calculated where you might expect a duplication of Earth down to the smallest details to occur, and you can actually do such a calculation. But that as far away as it was, it was still finite distance. And if there's an infinity of this, then there would be an infinite number of them, no matter how infrequent they were. Right? So, let's think about the experience that you're having now, down to the smallest detail, right? Repeating across the universe. Again, as with recurrence, our natural tendency would be to think, oh yeah, very interesting, but those are mere duplicates of me. They're not me. I'm kind of sealed off from whatever is happening to them. They're having an experience just like mine. It's not my experience because it's theirs, and we're distinct people, right? I'm going to argue otherwise. I'm going to argue that this is a mistake. What will help me to make my point is thinking about these. Thank you very much. Right. What I have here are two copies of the novel Huckleberry Finn. Now, let me introduce a bit of philosophical terminology that I think might help us in thinking about these matters. The novel, Huckleberry Finn, exists equally well in my right hand and in my left hand. There's a different copy in each hand, quite distinct, one quite distinct from the other. Right? The novel, Huckleberry Finn, can be thought of as a very detailed type. Type meaning kind. Right? A type that would specify all the words in it, their order, and so on and so on. Enough to make it the same novel. Right? Now that is one and the same type in either of my hands. So there's the same detailed type existing in both places. But there are nevertheless distinct tokens of that type in this philosophical terminology. Right? So we want to make ourselves clear about the distinction between types and tokens, because different things are true of them. For example, if this got destroyed in my right hand, then that would be the destruction of the copy of Huckleberry Finn, the token. But it wouldn't be a destruction of the novel. The novel would still exist here. So it's easier for a type to exist than a particular token of that type. And that's going to be very important to us. So now think of these duplicate occurrences across that infinite universe, and think of the experience as being like the adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And think of being in the experience as me, as like the character Huckleberry Finn, who exists equally well in any of these copies. Right? That here's the experience. The experience is not somehow attached to these objective coordinates that might distinguish these repetitions. The experience is of being here, being me, now. All of these features, by the way, have to do with the immediacy of the experience. Right? Whatever time an experience might be occurring in, the time is experienced as now because of the immediacy of the experience. It's whatever time this experience is occurring in now. Being here is a place simply being the place in which experience that is immediate is occurring. And that thing having the experience is me simply because that same immediacy is also the experience being mine. So that same quality of immediacy that is responsible for identifying times as now, places as here, and organisms as me. But all experience has exactly those same identifications within it. And that would include these duplicate occurrences. The being here, the being mine in the experience, would occur just as much in any of these places where exactly the same pattern had been brought about. And so, you being here in this experience, I would contend, exists in all those places. All right, the place you're in is not just would not be just one particular spot in the universe. It would be any place where this experience, being my experience, is occurring. The one in the same experience and one in the same experiencer. Now let me, the next signpost is replacing halves, exchanging halves. So I'm going to do a quick thought experiment to help make this still clearer. Imagine there was a world where there was only one copy of any book. Then you could easily confuse the copy and the book. Or let's talk about the novel and the copy. So you could think that being Huckleberry Finn with the character Huckleberry Finn was being this thing. Because no other thing that you've thought of has been like that. So it just is being this thing. You could think that the literary quality of the novel depends on it being this particular copy. This thing has that literary quality, and that's what it depends on. But then I could do thought experiments with you. I could ask you to imagine a precise duplicate being made. And then where would the literary quality be? Yeah, it would still be in this, but by virtue of something that's just as true over here. Where would the character be? Be in both places. Then I could try this. I'm not going to do this, it's a rather bad thing to do. I would split each copy down the middle and exchange halves. Now that would interfere with the identity of the copy. It would be the copy would be now half what it once was and half another. But the novel would be exactly the same if I exchanged halves between them. The novel would be the same, the character would be the same. It wouldn't be affected in the least by that. So I want to do something similar in this thought experiment. Imagine that a great power is in charge of this. And you can make it God. You know, say God's capable of anything. What God is going to do is, first, God can duplicate anything of that in my body. And what God is going to do is, he's going to remove half of my body, let's say right half of my body, but don't be too alarmed, because he's going to replace it instantaneously so that no one can pick up on this happening with a duplicate of the right half of my body. Not only that, but attach it seamlessly to the rest of the body, so it's attached just the way it would have been if working before. Okay, now am I still here at the end of that? Well, we know I'd be here in the left half, which has remained the same. So there shouldn't be any controversy about my being in the experiences related to the left half. But they're joined seamlessly here with the experiences of the right half. And they are just as much mine, completely mine. So it's not like, the body, you could say, is half the original body and half the new body. But me, no, what makes it me is something that rides on top of that. It has to do with a pattern that is perfectly well realized, even here with the replacement of half of the stuff that was me, half of the original token that I identified myself with. So I shouldn't have identified myself with the token. Right? Now let's have God then replace the left half in the same beautiful fashion. Now, all the stuff that was there originally has been replaced by stuff just like it. So God could instead have had this duplicate on the side here and thrown the duplicate in all at once. I mean, certainly with the replacement of the left half, if I still existed in all of me after the replacement of the right half, I'd survive that equally well. So I would have survived equally well the plopping down of the duplicate. I would still be there. Now, let's say that God then looks at these repetitions across the universe of this pattern. And you see, my temptation is to say, well, he looks at this one and then he looks at that one. I think that's a mistake, because I'm in both. I'm equally there in both, just as Huckleberry Finn's equally there in all the copies of Huckleberry Finn. But what he does anyway is he replaces, let's say, the left half of one with the left half of the other, so that he's exchanged halves between them. Now, how can we think about this if we're still looking at the tokens as being required for my identity and to make it me, the identity of the tokens? Then we've got half of the original token we thought we were singling out over there in the other. But I should be there with that half. And yet I should be here with the remaining half here. It makes no, the only way of making sense of this is to think that I was in both places anyway, so that we don't have some kind of contradicting and confusing thing of halves of me here and there. That's the wrong way of thinking of it. So what I've been arguing so far is that the identity of the token that I originally thought of myself as being isn't required for my existence at all. If my experience is there in another token, I'm there just as much. But what we haven't fooled around with much yet is the type. What things about the type of these tokens can be changed and it still be me? And what I would suggest is a hell of a lot. I mean, let me make some quick suggestions. Suppose I suddenly suffered amnesia. Couldn't any longer remember any of it. I'd still be undergoing that experience. That wouldn't have left me behind. It'd be experience which was immediate, in the first person, having this first person character, of the pain of not being able to remember things. So the memory as a type doesn't have to go along with me. Or I suppose hard to do during a talk if you're actually the speaker, a lot easier in the audience. Suppose I suddenly fell asleep and had a wild dream in which I experienced things totally different from what I had before. Would that not be my experience? Well, it would. And the reason it would be mine, of course, I'm saying, is because it would have that immediacy of experience that makes it mine. It doesn't matter what the details of it are at all for it to be mine. So remember, we're stripping away all those things that weren't really necessary to it being me, stripped away the identity of the token, which I suppose might have been the best candidate for a lot of us. And now I'm working on what's happening to that token, what in particular it's like. So yes, this signpost, oh yes. Let's go back for just a moment to recurrence. Okay, remember my first temptation offered to you to think that it would still be you beyond what you might ordinarily have thought, was that in the precise recurrence of your life, it was you when these things happened before. Why wouldn't you be there in that? But then suppose that he's got it in his eternal recurrence that it'll be precise. But even he has all these eons in between where all kinds of things are, moving around, all kinds of patterns. So even in his universe, we would expect that there would be variations before there'd be a precise repetition. There are many more ways that your life could be varied than just precisely repeated. What would keep that from being you? Once again, you'd come into the conception occurs. So something different happens. So suddenly you disappear from the world, and it's not your experience anymore. It's someone else's experience. There's no reason at all to think that. But this now brings us to what could seem to be an insurmountable problem, which is that now we could start thinking about simultaneous occurrences that are different from each other. See, like for example, there's the experience that I thought was the only one I'm having, right? And the experience over there in the audience of what is thought to be the only one I'm having. It could seem that I couldn't be having two different types of experience at the same time. Okay, well, now I'm going to argue that can't be true. The next signpost was the split brain illusion. I'm going to talk about some experiments that were actually done. This isn't yet a thought experiment. It's the real world. There were people who were operated on for epilepsy, where the corpus callosum, which is the bit of tissue that joins the two hemispheres of the brain, was cut. So this seemed to keep these episodes from traveling across the brain. So it was a great relief. But at the time, as I understand it, at the time these operations were first done, I think in the 50s, it was believed that the corpus callosum connecting the hemispheres was just there to keep the brain from sagging. So let's cut it. I mean, they must have thought there was some communication between the two, or it wouldn't have helped with the epilepsy. But it wasn't thought to be much. It was discovered in the 60s that, in fact, the corpus callosum was responsible for almost all of the integration of the activities of the two hemispheres, so that they move along with each other, so that mental processes will belong to you in both hemispheres in a straightforward way. And when this was discovered, it occurred to some people. I mean, most famously, someone named Sperry, that these people, we really ought to find out more about what's happened with these people who are operated on in that way. And some of them volunteered to take part in experiments. And something very disturbing was discovered in these experiments. And I'll give you an example of a slightly simplified example of one of the simplest of these experiments. There's a pile of objects they've got in the laboratory, and the subject puts his hands out of sight where he can't see them. Okay, there's a kind of instrument they were using that blocks his vision, and they even put some cloth over the hands so they can't be seen. And then one object is put into the left hand and another object into the right hand. Now here's the thing. The right hand is controlled by the left hemisphere of the brain. Strangely enough, that's how it works. And the sensations of the right hand are processed in that left hemisphere. The left hand is taken care of in the right hemisphere. Okay. So usually, of course, the corpus callosum working away, and this is all integrated. So I could tell you what I'm holding in either hand. I'll tell you I'm holding them simultaneously. So there'll be one sort of complicated experience of holding different objects in each hand. But with these people, there wasn't that integration anymore. So what would happen is this. Here, let me switch around like this. The key is in the right hand. I'm held out of sight, so vision can't help with this. So first these things are held. Then the pile of objects is shown to the subject. And the subject is asked to pick out what had been held. And the right hand can pick out what had been held in the right hand, but can't pick out what was held in the left hand, because that was processed in a different hemisphere, and there was no integration between them. Right? And of course the other way around. Or, see, language is processed in the left hemisphere. The left hemisphere is receiving the information from the right hand. So the person will be able to say, I'm holding a key, but won't be able to say, I'm holding a ring. Right? That will be closed off to speech. There's no way it could enter into speech. So the person will say, I'm not holding anything else, I'm just holding a key. But the left hand can draw the object that it's holding. Right? So, I mean, to make it stark, so if either hand was asked to draw what it was holding, it could only draw the object that was in that hand. Okay. Well, what's disturbing about this is that it seems as though two experiences excluding each other are happening in what we would have thought to be one person's mind. And this seems wrong to us. And now to examine further what seems wrong to us and what I think is the right answer to the question about this, let me elaborate a bit on this actual case and turn it into a kind of moderate thought experiment, which was first, that in a different version was first described by a philosopher named Derek Parfit. Here's my thought experiment. Let's say a device has been attached to my corpus callosum that this controller can affect. And what will happen is, if I press this button, the device there in my brain by the corpus callosum will anesthetize the corpus callosum. So it will be temporarily put out of commission. Now, let's say further in our little story that there are two things I want or need to be listening to. There's a wonderful concert, music that I love, and at the same time I have to study from these discs. I've got to slog through them. I hate this, but it's something that I've got to get done tonight. when this concert is being broadcast. See, but what I can do is this. Now, I can arrange that the sound of the concert is fed into the right ear. Now, let me explain. In the case of the hands, it's the opposite hemisphere that controls. In the case of the ears are so close to either hemisphere that it's the same side that controls the hearing for that ear. So if I plug this sound into my right ear, my right hemisphere will get that sound. Right? And there's music appreciation in the right hemisphere. So it's just the place, for the music. Whereas, I don't know if I can keep in my ears. If I feed the sound from these discs with a terrible study material on them, well, you've got language here, so I can slog through it and get the work done. And if I've pressed this button so that there's no interference, of one hemisphere from the other, then there will be perfect experience of enjoying the music of the concert without anything interfering with it, and this awful unrelieved experience of the studying, both occurring, one in each hemisphere. Okay? So the big philosophical question that arises is, what kind of time will I have? See, and the problem is this. It seems to us, doesn't it, that I can't have both experiences because there are simultaneous experiences that exclude each other. So whatever person is enjoying that concert can't be the same as the person who's doing the studying, and vice versa. That's what our prejudice would make us think. And it's very powerful, this. Within the experience of the concert, it will feel as though this is the only thing that's mine. It's the only experience that has this first-person character that's mine. And the same within the experience of the studying, right? But think about it. If instead of anesthetizing the corpus callosum, in pushing the button, I had anesthetized the left hemisphere, so that only the right was left functioning, then the experience of the concert could still occur in the right hemisphere without the studying going on, and that would certainly have been my experience. We couldn't doubt that that was my experience. In fact, if very unfortunately someone has a stroke in one hemisphere, whatever functions are left in the other hemisphere, that's experienced by that same person who had the stroke. And so that would definitely be my experience of the concert. Whereas on the other hand, if by pressing this I had anesthetized the right hemisphere, and then the studying was fed into the left, that would definitely have been my experience of studying. But think about it. Why should either of them fail to be mine just because there's something going on across the way? It's not the right kind of thing to make it fail. Both of them must equally be mine, even though in each there's an illusion that this is the only thing that is now mine. Now, let me go a little further with it. The anesthetic will wear off, let's say, by the next morning. At that time, everything will be pooled between the hemispheres. So I'll remember, oh yeah, I enjoyed that concert. And I'll remember, oh, I had to go through that terrible studying. And I'll remember both of them as having been my experience. What will mark them off for me in my memory as having been mine? The immediacy, the first-person character. They both would equally have it. So I'd know they were both mine, right? But it wouldn't be this later remembering of both that somehow retroactively made the earlier ones mine. They were mine even when there wasn't this kind of connection between them that displayed to one content of consciousness that both were mine. Even then, they were both equally mine, right? So that's the illusion I'm talking about. The illusion is, well, look, each bit of the consciousness which is mine has immediacy, first person, and is mine. Each comes as a package with certain connected contents. And within that package, only so much is revealed as being mine, as having that character of immediacy. And so there's the illusion that that's the limits of what's mine. So I am just whatever thing is having this and no other thing. But in fact, here I've got something else set up. This, I hope, can be a kind of a mnemonic device for you. If you look at this, you see the separation of the hemispheres, as in the case I've been describing. And this unconnected but mine. So that's a key theme we have to take on in reaching this understanding. We have to recognize that things can be unconnected and still be mine, even though there's an illusion within each package of connected contents that that's the only stuff that's mine. Okay? So there are lots of ways you can go, you might be brought along to understanding just what I'm saying, and then fall back very easily. People have done this a lot, I can tell you. They see the points I'm making, and then they forget a little bit. So they start thinking, now wait, Zuboff thinks that all the experiences and all the minds and bodies of the world are equally mine. So he must think they're connected together, that there's some connection, some deep connection or something like that. No! Right? I mean, when I make the point that both the listening to the concert and the doing the studying would be equally mine, I'm not saying, and that suddenly connects them together, and so they're shared. The whole point is it doesn't matter what the connections are. Anything that's immediate in first person is my experience. That's all that makes it my experience. But it won't be revealed. Since this is such a powerful illusion and such a block to understanding the truth about this, let me use one other example to try to get it across. Yeah. Okay, here's a red pen, a felt tip pen. A red object, right? Now, I'd like you just to try to imagine that this was the only red object that had ever been seen. Okay, all the other colors were spread across things the way we find, but it just happened that nothing else in the world was red, or had been seen to be red. Then, like that earlier case where there was only one copy of every novel, and there was a confusion between the identity of the copy and the identity of the novel. Here could be a confusion between the quality, the abstract quality being red, and being this particular object here. Oh, red? That's over there in that place. And that you got to go to that room and so on. And that's what red is. But we could do thought experiments where I ask you, hey, couldn't it still be red if you changed the shape a bit? And look, we can move it over here. So what if there was another thing over there while this was still here and it had that same quality? Couldn't that still be red? I'm asking you to do something similar. When I'm addressing you, I'm addressing a particular connected content of this consciousness, right? In which it's not revealed that all the other consciousness is equally mine. Equally yours, equally mine means the same thing. So just as in seeing only one red object, you can confuse that quality of immediacy. It makes the pains be of self-interest, the lines of vision coming in and all that. You can confuse that with being this thing that has tied to it the connected contents of experience. But it's a mistake. So if you feel that temptation, have a look over here where it says unconnected but mine. And remember the brain bisection. Okay, so I hope you've now got some understanding of what I think about personal identity and how radical it is. And now I want to explain that I have a very powerful probability argument in favor of this view being right. Enormously powerful, conclusive probability argument in favor of this view being right. So to explain it to you, I need to introduce a couple of things about probability. Right? And I have these two decks of cards with a red back and a blue back. Now, I didn't bring 52 cards along with me, plus the Joker. What I did was I just brought one suit in each, the diamonds. Okay, and that works out pretty well. I think we have about 13 people here. There are 13 cards that are diamonds. So let me just ask you to distribute. I don't mean you get up and distribute it, but take one and hand it.
Any one.
Any card. Yep. Just right. And distribute them around. Okay, so that that we have. So each person has one card. Might skip some of them.
Observing a
I'm
different way.
listening.
Oh, good, good.
Check it out.
Yeah.
Do you want a card? Yeah, you're entitled to a card. Well, I'm sorry, there may be someone left out of this, but you'll see what happens. Anyway, that will make a great difference. Okay. Okay, that's fine. Now, the first point I want to make about probability is one that I think hasn't been generally recognized. And it's that probability is perspectival. It matters, it depends on perspective whether an event is probable or not. And I want to illustrate to you that to you this way. Could you pull just one of those cards out? Okay. Thank you very much. Now, who has the 6 of diamonds? Okay, now, see, very lucky, you get a prize.
Sweetie. And I'm intermediary.
Ah, thank you.
Okay, now here's the point I want to make. Enjoy it. They're nice.
Yes, that would.
Yeah. Here's the point I want to make. They came all the way from Switzerland.
Oh, they're good then.
So,
Why can't I have one?
well, maybe you will. You'll see. We'll do one more thing. I should have brought a lot of them. Anyway, yeah, here's my point. Something just happened to you that was improbable.
Not improbable.
There was a coincidence between the card you had and the card that was randomly selected from this.
It's a chance 1 in 169.
Sorry?
I think 1 in 169.
No, 1 in 13.
I think. Yeah, but
I had
twice.
13 cards. Sorry?
But it's your chance and my chance of hitting the same card, so we've both got that.
No, what I believe is this, that improbability requires coincidence. There's nothing improbable if it's not a coincidence. Right? This coincidence occurred for you between what you happen to be holding and what was selected from here. And that was an improbable event. Now, those of you that had different cards something quite probable happened for you. Because if it was 12 and 13, that your card wouldn't be the one that was selected here. Right? So nothing improbable occurred for you from your perspective. Right? And the people who had no cards, right? There was absolutely no improbability involved. It was just a card being selected. There was no coincidence that could highlight an improbability. And that's what's required for improbability. Okay, so that's my first point about probability, that it's perspectival. Right? And that will play a real role in my argument. Then there's another point about probability, which, see, I took this back. Yeah. Now, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to try to hide this from you. I'm going to turn my back, which is very rude, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one of two things. Either I'll take a card out randomly from this bunch of diamonds and put only that into this box. Or I'll put the whole deck, well, not the whole diamond collection into the box. See, and let me, we'll be making use of this terminology later. I'll say that, as you'll see why, if I put only one card in there, it'll be what I'll call the hard game. If I put all of the cards in, it will be the easy game. Because the point of it will be for the card you holding to match what's in the box. Okay? So, here I go. You don't know what I've done with it, of course. I'm putting either one card in there or the whole thing. If I'm putting one card, I've kept the other cards outside the box. Okay, just enough from there. Now let me call on. You wanted to have this.
I want chocolate.
Yeah, you wanted to have it. So, what card have you got?
Shall
Yeah.
Okay. It's the fifth of diamond.
It's what?
5.
Five,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay, so I can tell you that card is in the box. So you've matched a card in the box, and you'll get a piece of chocolate. But now here's the important point. Which game do you think I played? The hard game where I put only one card in there, or the easy game where I put all the cards in there? Now use as evidence.
The easy game.
The easy one.
Yes. You see why you should make that inference. Let me explain it the way I like to explain it. If there had been a match between that card and a single randomly, independently selected card, then that would have been improbable. And it's improbable that something improbable was what happened. Right? There was no improbability involved in the other hypothesis, so that hypothesis itself ought to be judged to be more probable than the other one. And that's how I think all our empirical reasoning works that way. Right? So sometime I could explain that to you. I think you solve all the problems about skepticism, with this kind of reasoning. And I'm going to use this reasoning in establishing the truth of my view of personal identity, which, by the way, I call universalism. Might as well give it a name. It's a little easier. Okay, now those are my points about probability. And now I'm going to, this is a bit too elaborate for me to bring here into the room, but I'll describe for you a case, a fantastic case. Right? This is a case in which we're thinking of a hotel that has countless rooms in it. This is this most extraordinary hotel. It's the biggest you could ever think of. It's got what I'll call countless rooms. Any number you come up with, the number of rooms are more than that. I won't especially say it's infinite, but countless. Okay. And let's say in each of those rooms, there's one person sleeping. And this is an induced sleep. This is in each room, that person in each room will not wake up unless awakened. And in doing the awakening, one of two games will be played. In the easy game, all are awakened. In the hard game, only one is awakened, chosen randomly among these countless sleepers. Okay. Now imagine you're in that hotel, you're one of the sleepers, and you find yourself waking up, and it's explained to you that what accounts for this is either of these two things. Either a hard game was played or an easy game was played. You can make the same inference we made before, only much more powerfully. Yes, someone will be awakened if it's a hard game, but it's so improbable that it would have been you. Right? And that someone will make this same inference that the easy game was played and be wrong. But it's so improbable that you would be awake to make that mistake. Right? So it's the right inference. Even in that case, it's the right inference to make. Right? Now, let me point out something about the perspectival character of this inference. Right? Suppose I'm outside this hotel. Big as it is, there's some outside to it, and I'm there, and it's reported to me that so-and-so was awakened. And that so-and-so might have been one of countless awakeners, if it's the easy game, or would be the one awakener in the hard game. So I have what seems like evidence. So-and-so is awakened. Right? And at first it looks like the same evidence that you'd have had if you awakened in the hotel, but it isn't. Right? And it isn't because it wouldn't be improbable for you that so-and-so is awakened, just as it wouldn't be improbable for the people who didn't have cards that some card was selected randomly. No improbability would be involved either way, whichever game was played for them. But for the sleeper, there's this incredibly powerful inference that the sleeper must make. Yes. Even though, again, if that happens to be the only awakener, then it'll be the wrong inference. But so what? It'd be so improbable that this wrong inference would be being made by him. Okay, so you see that. Good. Now, what my next signpost is the improbability of my existence in the ordinary view. Now, on the ordinary view of things, I'll just concentrate on certain things that had to be the case for you to have come into existence. I have a rather neat way of highlighting this. Loads of things have to be the case for you to come into existence. But let's just look at your conception to begin with. First we'll look at your conception. Conservatively speaking, there were 200 million sperm cells involved in that. On the ordinary view, if any sperm cell but the one that actually did make it had instead made it to the egg, then a potential brother or sister would have come into the world, and your experience would be blank. It'd be, like what this dragon represents. There'd be no experience ever for you, right? On my view, it didn't matter what sperm cell hit the egg, because whatever became conscious would be me, would be you, in other words, calling yourself me. So there's no improbability for you about which sperm cell made hit the egg, it becomes like these people looking at the card being selected. See, only if you were assigned one sperm cell, like the way you were assigned one particular card, and that happened to match what made it to the egg, would this immensely improbable thing have occurred, which would be your existence on the ordinary view, so that there could be my experience that would otherwise not exist in the way the ordinary view organizes these things. Okay, now it's worse than that, because before you could have been conceived, your parents had to have been conceived. And it was 1 in 200 million for each of them. So that's 1 in 8 septillion that you will come out of it. But your grandparents had to have been conceived. So it gets worse each generation as you go back, till finally get overlaps and so on. But, and all these things had to go right for you to have existed, for there to have been experience that was mine. Right? All these things had to have gone right, going back through the dinosaurs and before that, or you would never have existed.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter, because somebody would have existed.
Yes, just as in the hotel. Someone would have awakened, but how improbable for that the person who awakened that he would have been that someone.
Yes, but it doesn't have to be that particular somebody. It's a person.
Yeah, it would be a person, but you have the perspective that allows you to make this inference.
Yeah, it just
Because you were assigned a card, right?
Yeah.
And if you take the ordinary view of what is required for you to exist, you were assigned a sperm cell, in effect. Right? It was like having a bet on one sperm cell. And because of your peculiar attachment to that sperm cell, it was a coincidence, greatly improbable coincidence, that was the sperm cell that made it to the egg.
But my view is it doesn't really matter whether it was me or my
What
sister
it'll
or
matter
brother,
to, sorry,
but because it's just a child being
it
born.
matters, it matters if you understand what I'm saying, to whether you exist or not.
Yeah.
Right? I'm saying you coming into existence was easy. Easy. I mean, all through what I've been saying, it's easy. It doesn't matter what token it is. Remember, it doesn't matter what particular thoughts occur. It doesn't matter. All of it's yours as long as there's just the immediacy and the experience. And what could be an experience without it having that immediacy? I don't think it would be what we call experience. So all experience has what it takes for it to be my experience. And remember, experience being mine is what's wagging this tail of something being me. It's only me because the experience has this character of being mine, right? So that made it not at all improbable that you emerged from all these lines of conceptions. Whereas if you think of yourself as tied to only one narrow set of possibilities in the history of the world, which is what the ordinary view says you are, that's why you're annihilated in death. If that's what you think of yourself as, you have to think that from your perspective, not others' perspectives, they just saw whatever came out of the womb. But you wouldn't have seen anything if that thing hadn't come out of the womb. So from your perspective, something immensely improbable has occurred, except that there's this alternative hypothesis which predicts that it'll happen, which makes it easy. Right? Like putting all the cards in the box instead of just one. So you have to think that I can't possibly express how much more probable that my view of personal identity is true than that the ordinary view everyone else has is. Everyone else. They're all me. But they're most of what I am is very misguided about this, and quite naturally so, because of that powerful illusion that I explained, which is perfectly predicted in my view. Of course there'd be that illusion. And of course it would be an illusion. Okay, so
Can't you say
that's...
that about anything though? I mean,
Sorry?
Can't you say that about if you do that, it's the same thing?
No. Look, you didn't have a card, right? So that card being picked at random had no improbability about it for you. No, sure, there are all kinds of complex events occurring around us, right?
Yeah, and they're all.
I'll tell you what's
they're all
required.
very improbable.
No, they're not. What's required for them to be improbable is this. There has to be a coincidence. See, when I say that in an ordinary deck, a card has a 1 in 52 chance of being selected. Let's say I say that the ace of clubs has a 1 in 52 chance of being randomly selected from the deck. Okay. Here's how we should unpack this. Here's what it really means. If I first pay attention independently to the ace of clubs, then a card is drawn from the deck. There's the improbability of 1 in 52, right? We're implicitly, independently identifying the thing when we assign it the probability in an event. But if it's just whatever card was picked without anything highlighting it in this way, then there's no improbability involved in it. So any event in the room, sure, if I had sort of just sketched some peculiar situation in the room without having had any connection with it, come in and it matched it perfectly, then something improbable would have occurred in that thing matching what I brought in, right? But if I just walk in and I see all these situations of things, there's nothing improbable occurring.
I don't see your point though.
At which point?
I don't, because I mean the fact that you came here tonight is
Yeah.
totally improbable but probable. I don't see your overall point.
You can only identify something as improbable if you somehow identify it, designate it independently,
Yeah.
and then have it coming up. If it's just what the world presents to you, like again, one card was selected from those diamonds, but you didn't happen to have any card in your hand. There was nothing improbable about that. If you want to say it's 1 in 13, right, then what do you want to say about what it was for him? For him, it was an improbability which was 1 in 13 because it was his card that came out. For her, it was the very probable thing of her card not coming out, which was 12 in 13. So it deserved that assignment of
It's the same
probability.
argument
For
as
you,
everything.
there was no reason to assign any probability at all.
Oh well, I just don't get the point because every single thing is like that. Everything that leads
Well,
is the same.
what you're doing is you're needlessly multiplying improbabilities. I mean, to think that everything is equally improbable, then you can't do any of these inferences. I mean, these. Okay, suppose I grant to you that we call these things improbable. Okay, so when a card is selected from the deck without any connection to anything else, we'll call it improbable. Say it's only 1 in 52. Okay. Well, it's kind of inoperable with regard to inferences. There's no basis for making an inference. You can only use probability in inferences when they're the coincidental probabilities that I'm talking about. Otherwise, you could call them inert. So what I think is improbability. Well, being improbable is like being dangerous. Now you can say that the tiger in the zoo is dangerous. Perfectly all right to call it dangerous, right? But when you think about it further, you see that as long as it's behind the bars and you're nowhere near it and all that, nobody's near it, is it really dangerous? You can quite well say that no, it isn't dangerous unless someone's in a situation that makes it dangerous. Now, he was in a situation that made it improbable that that card be drawn from the deck because he would be matching it. Whereas with the others, it would be 12 and 13. It wouldn't be matching it. So for him, it's like someone falling into the tiger's compound. For sure, it's dangerous for him. Right? And you can still call a tiger dangerous. If you like, you can call these things improbable. But they're not improbable. They're improbable in the way the lion firmly kept, under a lock in the zoo is dangerous. But the and all of that's inert with regard to inferences. You can't make any inferences on that basis. I guarantee you. You could try to think of some, but you won't come up with any. All the inferences you can make using probabilities have to depend on these perspectival probabilities, where the perspective is right, to make it on one hypothesis improbable, on the other hypothesis no longer improbable.
It's just a language thing, isn't it?
No, it's how we reason. It's how we look. Was it just a language thing that you made the right inference to whether it was the easy game being played? No, it was you learned something about the probability of what was the case in the world. Didn't matter what language you used or what you called the thing. There were these 13 diamonds lying in the box. That's not a language thing. Right? And how did you reason the likelihood that there were the 13 lying in the box? Because you thought how improbable if it matched the one card that was highlighted. Unless they were all put in the box instead of just one randomly. So you said to yourself, well, it's improbable that something improbable happened. So, it will happen maybe 1 in 13 times and so on, but then I'd be right if I said it was a hard game. So I must think that, and it's not a matter of language, it's a matter of understanding what's happening in the world.
What's your core point, though?
What's that, sorry?
What's the core point that you're bringing across here?
Well, I'm bringing...
Something to do with probability, or what?
Well, you heard me, you were here, right? You heard me argue that what I was saying about personal identity had to be right on the basis of probability. That's the core point for me. I mean, I'm very interested in these probability points, and I think you need to understand these things to understand how we get knowledge about the world. But my talk centers on this incredible thing about who you are, and so that's what this was serving in today's talk. I've got one more bit to do. Yeah.
The dragon.
I'm just trying to, I think a lot of people may have lost you a bit to this talk because it's very precise. I've followed some of it and lost other bits. I think if you don't follow every step, it's quite hard to get to the end of your point. So that's not criticism. You're very precise,
No.
but most people are,
Oh, thank you. It's very useful.
don't follow stuff that well. Now it seems to me, just in terms of what the most important bits of a human being, I mean, human experience to me seem to be, is something to do with individual consciousness and death, and my perception of whether I am an individual and whether I'm going to die. That seems to be somewhere in the mix. The probable thing seems to be something to do with getting to that. Am I right that that's got quite a large part?
Okay,
The conclusion might be that as an applicable thing when we all walk out, what can we apply to our
Okay.
lives that's going to make
What
sense?
I'm saying, this very radical thing I'm saying, is that it seems that there's a you confined
Yeah.
to being sitting in this chair, seeing things from that angle, right? Has certain pains that and others have pains that aren't being had by that you. I'm saying that's a mistake. That you, in the strongest sense, it's not a matter of language, are there in all conscious things equally.
Right, that I can
Okay.
relate to. That I can I kind of have that experience a lot anyway, maybe because my family.
Well, but remember,
but
I'm not saying what I'm not saying is that there's some mental
Yeah,
connection
exactly.
among all these.
Yeah.
I'm saying don't need any connections.
Yeah.
Even in the case of brain bisection, you can break the connection within there, and it's mine on both sides.
Does that it sounds, because I've studied Buddhism a lot,
Yeah.
that it sounds similar to things that Buddhists talk about, and the experience listening to you is similar to when I listened to a very advanced Tibetan Buddhist teacher.
Okay.
My brain starts to scramble and various
Yeah.
things don't fit together right in my head, and I feel a bit like woozy. And it's something to do with my normal perception of reality, which is that I am separate, I'm over here, you're over there.
Yes, that's right.
This is finite, whatever. And that's somehow breaking down. If you follow
Yes.
it right,
Yeah.
for me, and that's why I like quantum
Oh,
physics as well. I
okay.
end up with some expanded feeling in my head that it's not quite
Yeah.
what I thought it
Well,
was,
that-
and I find it liberating.
I
Other
mean,
people might find it
yeah, the
scary.
feeling, that feeling is fine, it's great. But whatever you're feeling, this will be true. You know, to understand it's true doesn't require. Now, yeah, let me say something about Hinduism in particular,
Yeah.
in relation to this. Okay. Now, in Hinduism, very central to a lot of what they say is this mystical experience, where someone, you know, let's say, concentrates on a flame, and then everything else seems to disappear, and then there's a strange experience of being one with the world, or something like that. Right? So, and that figures a lot in the thought of Hinduism and later Buddhism. But there was a school of Hindu thought called the Shankara, in which there was theorizing as well about the self. The self is called the Atman. And what Shankara Hinduism claimed about the self, the Atman, the subject of all experience, was that it was pure. And here was what they meant by pure. That, look, I can be adding 2 and 2 and getting 4. I can be feeling sensations in my toes. Very different mental contents. But the Atman's present equally to both of them. So the Atman, they in a way were making a sort of point I was making earlier. That it doesn't matter what the content of the consciousness is, it's still the same experiencer, the same Atman. Right? So they talk about the purity of the Atman, and then they also believed that there was transmigration of the Atman from one body to another. So the identity of the body was not necessary to the identity of the Atman. It could exist equally well in a different body, and it could exist equally well in different states of consciousness. Now, if you put those two together, what you get is something like my view. My view is that doesn't matter where consciousness is occurring, it's the same Atman. That which is experiencing, right? The difference is they think of the Atman as a thing, right? I don't think of it that way at all. I think there are lots of different distinct things that are all me, right? They all deserve to be called me because their experience is mine, and that's all that makes experience mine, right? So again, if I start by asking you, how do you know your experience is yours? Well, it's a description within the nature of the experience. All the details could be changed. I talked about half replacements of all the stuff, and it doesn't matter to it. Its being mine is independent of all that. Right? So what happened was, this is my theory of the development of this side of Hinduism. Shankara gave way to Vedantic Hinduism. In Vedantic Hinduism, it was said that there was only one self in all conscious life. And that's a natural way to go from that beginning in the Shankara view of the purity of the Atman. If it's so pure, capable of different bodies, then it's the same in all of it. Right? But once again, I would imagine what the Vedantic had in mind was that it was a kind of thing that was the same. I don't think that at all. The things in the world are the same things that anyone might think to be in the world. It doesn't matter what the world is like that way, on my view. As long as the experience is first person in style, then whatever's having it is me. See, that's my view. So it's not mystical, it's not, right? But there is a strong relationship with that stuff. So I'm not surprised you felt that. Now, should I add as quickly as possible this last bit? Because I left something out. See, we banished death as annihilation. That was a mistake. That was you're identifying what you were with this thing that comes to an end. So how can I experience not experiencing? How can I, that the thing Larkin is talking about is like a paradox that gets resolved when you see that there is no such you becoming nothing. Right? You are there in all consciousness and always will be, wherever, whenever it exists. So you won't be annihilated through the death of one organism that has your consciousness. So we've done away with this dragon here, and we got this treasure, which is the treasure of boundless experience. Now I'll admit it's a kind of mixed blessing, because there are some pretty horrible experiences. But I think that by and large, experience is not so horrible. Why? Because most creatures that have made it through evolution and so on, that can most of the time function okay. So things are either okay for them or very good a lot of the time, because they're so well crafted in the process. Or God made them that way, whichever you like. So these things that you are, there's some real suffering there, but a lot of it's going to be great. You'll see all these planets where life occurs. You're there. Not just the ones that duplicate this, but you're there too. Right now, you're in any of those. You're all of them. Now, there was this, wasn't there? There's this understanding of nature's great secret. Okay, and let me try to do this very quickly for you. Okay, it again involves probability. In physics, it has been recognized that there is a way of describing the world that's represented by what's called the anthropic principle. The physical world is such that it allows for the development of life. And that's no easy thing, because a lot of things have to be true of the basic nature of the universe for life to develop. Let me give you just one example. And let me say, the kind of physical world that we experience, it is supposed to be there across the whole universe. They're the same particles, protons, electrons, same forces, gravity, electromagnetic. Right. Let me center on one of these things that has to be as it is for life to be able to develop, and therefore for consciousness to be able to develop. Okay? That thing is the strong nuclear force. Now there are only 4 forces in our physical world. Right? There's electromagnetic force, there's gravitational force, there's the weak nuclear force, and the strong nuclear force. Right? Now, here's how it works. What we're going to be interested in, here's the periodic table. Here's the periodic table. What makes the different elements differ from each other? How many protons are in the nucleus? And therein, how many electrons are orbiting it and can link up with other. That's how chemistry can occur, because there are electrons in orbits around protons. Electrons with negative charge are pulled around the nucleus where there's a positive charge. Okay. Now, in the nucleus of the atom, there are neutrons and there are protons. Neutrons are neutral in their charge. Protons are positively charged. Now, like charges repel. So what are those protons doing sitting there together in the nucleus of an atom? They should be repelling each other so that no nucleus can be formed. Well, yeah, if there was just the electromagnetic force, which is what I'm talking about, then there wouldn't be any nuclei of atoms. But there's another force that comes into play when protons get close enough to each other, as they do in certain high energy states. They can get close to each other, and then the strong nuclear force pulls them together. So there's another whole force that operates on those protons to get them together. But then why isn't it pulling all the protons together? So you just have one big nucleus. Well, the answer is interesting. See, the electromagnetic force, like the gravitational force, falls off as the square of the distance. What that means is, if the distance is twice as much, the force is 4 times weaker. So that's how it works. Right? Well, the strong nuclear force falls off as the 7th power of the distance. So it gets weak very quickly, much more quickly, than the electromagnetic force. And that's why it doesn't just pull all these protons together. Furthermore, but you might still think, but once they've been caught at that short distance that you need for a nucleus of an atom, won't they just keep going further and further together? Well, no. When they get too close together, the strong nuclear force becomes a repulsion. So they sit nicely together in the nucleus of an atom. Now look, it's no wonder that the earliest people who pointed these things out, this anthropic character of the universe, thought that there had to be some kind of theological explanation of this, that it was designed so that life would develop. Right? Because if it's merely some kind of completely impersonal, logical necessity that matter be as it is in our universe, as the physicists have tried to study it, right, then what an incredible coincidence that happens also to match the requirements for the existence of chemistry, the existence of life.
Oh yes, but then you're making an assumption that what we have is the only possibility. There might be other source possibility, which has nothing to do with.
That's what I'm going to do.
Oh,
okay. So yeah. So and I know actually, well, way back in 1960s, I read about this question, this problem, and it occurred to me then. Wait a second. What if you had lots of different physical worlds? That the physical world was actually something a lot more protean than what we find just in this one. That there were, maybe you could think of it in terms of alternative universes, in which there are all kinds of different basic fundamental facts about particles or forces or something else completely. And what if you had enough variety in this so that there was no improbability that among all of these there would be some, either one universe or maybe many, if there was enough of this going on, that would just happen to be fixed in such a way that life would develop in it. Yeah, that's right. So this is the many universes, many worlds way of yes, the multiverse, as they've more recently called it, right? And lots of physicists have actually accepted this, right? And the way they put it is this. They say, look, if there were lots of different kinds of physical worlds, so nothing is designing it or anything, lots of it. Well, of course, we would find ourselves in one that allowed for the development of life. How could we find ourselves in one that didn't? So the basic determinations in this world are fixed by our requirements, right? But if you want to understand matter in a real way, you have to understand it has much more general character that takes all these different forms. This is just one of them. So it gives you this immense view of nature that you otherwise perhaps wouldn't have arrived at. Although there are other things in physics that point in such directions too. But what hasn't been noticed is this, that it so far won't work. They haven't done enough. What they need is to add to it my view of personal identity, or it simply will not work. Now, let me explain why. I mean, one nice way to get into it is this. When I first came to London in '74, I was asked if I wanted to give a talk to the department. And I thought I would talk about many universes because no one else was talking about it then. So I thought, oh, they'll be all excited. This will be wonderful. I had this coat, which was a lot of different colored pieces of leather woven together. So I wore that. I thought, how fitting that would be. So this is going to be fun. But sitting in the audience was a still very famous logician named Stallnaker, American logician, who happened to be visiting. And after my talk, he came up to me and said, oh, this is not going to work. I thought, well, it had to work. How was he going to explain the physical world? Right? And what he pointed out was this. He said, suppose you played a very tough game of Russian roulette. Like, let's say you have 5 bullets in the chamber, and you have to spin it, say, 1,000 times, and shoot it at your head. And if the bullet happens to be the right position, you're dead. And you have to survive 1,000 times of playing this, right? Now, suppose I did happen to survive. Just happened the empty chamber was at the right place, each of the 1,000 times, by chance. Okay. Now, I have to count myself very lucky, right? It's so lucky it's unbelievable. But, yeah, it can get too lucky, yeah. But, what he pointed out to me was this. If you imagine a game like that, it won't help you in playing your game to survive if you say that there are zillions, countless of people who are playing the Russian roulette. Right? And the reason is, like what we were talking about in the hotel, right? That, yes, that will finally make it probable someone will survive, but it won't make it the least bit more probable that you will survive. So you haven't helped your explanation of your surviving by positing it happening a lot of times. Now, the ordinary view of what you are ties you not just to a particular universe, of course, a particular universe, it ties you to some particular little portion of it. Because it'd be a mere duplicate if you were elsewhere, even in that universe, let alone anywhere else in immense physical reality beyond the universe. Right? So you had to be right there, or experience wouldn't be yours, wouldn't be mine. Right? So, saying that there are countless universes in which the thing is spun, and there's bound to be some, won't help my universe being anthropic. It's still improbable from my perspective that my universe is anthropic unless I would be there wherever the consciousness was produced.
But you might be another you.
No. I mean, once you let go of the requirement of me to be a particular token, but that's the crucial thing here, then I will find myself. So think of all these Russian roulette games being played, and somehow I would simply be brought to where there was a survival. Then there's no improbability in the whole business for me. Right? And that's how my view of personal identity, when mixed with the multiverse, where the multiverse takes all these different forms, that's where it makes probable that we have a universe of the sort that we find. So, to explain fully, why we've got periodic chart, you need to understand that it's a mistake to think that we are just tied down to one organism in one place. Right. And let me, while I'm talking about science, let me make one more point about what I'm saying. Okay? The progress of science, the most important progress of science, has always been, I think, in this direction. because our experience puts a great importance on being here, on being now, on being me. Right? Each of our experiences has got all that true of it, that it's here, it's now, it's me. I'm saying that being here or now or me is just a subjective quality that's there in all experience. But it seems as though it's objective. Not so much with places, not so much with here, because we easily recognize we could have been another place instead. So we won't say there's something about this place that makes it have to be here. But in the case of time, where we can't travel around like that, we do make that same mistake. What we do is we experience this moment always as now. Well, being this moment is its being now. And whatever time the experience is in is the time that's now. And we wrongly think that there's something about the time that makes it now, that it's an objective present. And that's why it has this feeling of being now. So again, it's, what the dog is supposed to be the objective time, the real present. And then that's wagging the tail of the experience of it as now. In fact, all experiences are experienced as now, no matter when they occur. And the times they are in are now only because they're from the vantage point of that experience. It's subjective. It's not an objective determination. Right. I'm saying exactly the same thing about being me. Right? We marry this feeling that whatever's having this experience is me with the identity of the thing that happens to be having it, instead of seeing that it's fixed to be my experience in the nature of the experience itself. So we make that same mistake. Now, if you don't give up here being objectively important, then you can't do Newtonian physics. See, Ptolemaic physics, where everything was revolving around the Earth. Now, we didn't make our particular position objective, but we made sort of the general position we were in the center of the world because it felt like that. But what Newton saw was that if you think the world works in terms of a universal principle, you don't have everything turning around what's here. Here has no such objective significance. You've got to let go of that place as objectively unique. And in time, for Einstein to have worked out his theories of relativity required that you recognize that being now is just the subjective identification of any time an experience is occurring in by that experience. That it's not, there isn't an objective simultaneity, there isn't that problem we had of how could I be having different experiences at the same time? Well, there isn't even, if you're talking about across the universe, the occurrence of simultaneity, isn't even any objective simultaneity there. The nowness, now is just relative to an experience. The past is what was before the experience, the future is what's ahead of it. But time itself doesn't have a now, which is objectively significant, with past and future having an objective significance in that way. There's a before and an after, and a line of development. But there's a sense in which it should be understood timelessly, as timelines. And so you have to let go of seeing time in this mistaken way. And then, unless you let go of seeing a particular organism with its particular identity in space and so on, as me, unless you let go of my universe having a unique position in the world, you can't understand why the universe you're in, my universe, turned out in this way that was okay for you to exist. But again, you let go of that, and we can understand nature in terms of universal laws. We can and eliminate any improbability from the nature of the physical world. Okay, so we get all that.
Yeah.
Perfectly.
Very well.
Clear as mud. It's just a computer. No, very good. Very interesting. Very deep.
Thank you so much.
Very
Thank you
good.
so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.